you eat your emotions away? Are you someone that reaches for those comfort foods when you're feeling stressed or feeling down, not feeling great about yourself? Well, this is pretty common. It is a human response. So let me enlighten you with today's episode of Me and My Health Up. I'm your host, a clinical nutritionist and lifestyle medicine specialist. The purpose of this podcast is to enhance and enlighten your well-being. And today we'll be covering eating your emotions, the intersection of nutrition and mental health. Yes, we're going to be talking about how mental health affects your nutrition and how your nutrition affects your mental health. So it's a two-way process, and we're going to be covering that combination, the intersection of both of these areas, mental health and nutrition. So let's get underway with today's episode of Eating Your Emotions. So I can relate to this. When you're feeling a bit not so great, you generally go for that chocolate bar, that packet of biscuits. Some people it's lollies, whatever it is, it's your comfort food. So this is a natural human response. There's nothing wrong with you. It's labeled emotional eating and you think it's, there's something wrong with you having that emotional eating problem. But in actual fact, it's just a human desire to eat when we're not fulfilled, to eat when we're stressed. So we're wanting survival, essentially, in those situations. We are in that survival thinking about, what's my purpose in life? I'm not adding any value. You're getting down about yourself. You're not happy with your life. This is this sense of, my survival's at threat here. This is how, this human species, in terms of our evolution, we're constantly seeking meaning and purpose. So when we're feeling that we don't have meaning and purpose and we're depurposing, then it's a natural response to be in that survival mode. And what's happening is our blood glucose and oxygen is going to the limbic system. And this area of the brain is the emotional center. And this area is actually running you when you're going to that cupboard for those packet of biscuits, that chocolate bar, or whatever it is that drives that comfort. Or you never feel satisfied, like you keep eating and you still feel like you need more. Yet I had a client said to me the other day, I actually eat to the point that I could vomit and I still keep eating. And it's because of this feedback loop of feeling unfulfilled and looking extrinsically for that fulfillment, and in the process being mindless. And so nothing's helping, nothing's remedying the situation, and you need more and more of it. It's a bit like an addiction. And this is where our addiction center is also in this area too, the nucleus accumbens. And this is in that sort of limbic center area of the brain. And it drives that needing more and more and more, because if we're feeling unfulfilled, we don't feel we're adding value, and we are purpose and meaning seeking creatures on this earth. We're always seeking that meaning and purpose to everything in our lives. So in this episode, we're going to be talking more about meaning and purpose, and because that's really important to getting you out of that survival area of the brain, to getting you into the thrival area of the brain, which is the prefrontal cortex. So this is our evolved part of the brain, and this is where we can govern our emotions. This is where we're very centered, poised. This is also known as the gratitude center, the love center, the center of love and gratitude. How fantastic. We're more objective in our thinking when we're in the prefrontal cortex, and we can control our emotions. We have foresight in the prefrontal cortex, whereas in the emotional center, we live by hindsight. It's that trial and error. That didn't work. Whereas in the prefrontal cortex, we can look ahead and plan, and we can live a life by design as opposed to a life by default, which is when we're in the limbic center. So a lot of what we're going to be discussing today is how to get you out of this limbic center, this emotional center, and get you up in that prefrontal cortex, that where you know that you're on mission, you're totally fulfilled, you're adding value, and you don't need to look extrinsically for that fulfillment. It's coming from within. It's that feeling of joy. These are transcendental emotions. Our lower emotions, the ones that are driven by the polarized views of the world, our subjective views of the world, it's that polarized view, like that subjective bias towards the positive. So thinking, oh, yeah, that made me happy. Oh, that's what I need more of. And this is the desire center that's running you. Whereas joy comes from within. It's an intrinsic driver from within, knowing that we're on purpose, we're on mission, and it gives us confirmation, yes, you are living a fulfilled life. And that's when we're in the prefrontal cortex. But the more we're desiring something, the more like we desire happiness and just positive emotions, the more we're in that addictive center. And we're essentially being run by the external environment. The external environment is running us. If all these things line up, then I'm happy. But trying to get all those things to line up are out of your control. You can only control how you perceive things, your decisions, and your actions. So it's just that sort of once in the blue moon, everything lines up and you feel great. But the only thing you can control on a regular basis is how you perceive things. And so we're going to talk about managing your perceptions so that you can calm your emotions and not be run by your emotions. Your emotions are running you when you're emotionally eating. So how do you get fulfilled? How do you feel like you're on purpose? And so that you don't require these extrinsic areas of motivation to get that sort of dopamine hit, to feel that connection, to feel that boost of serotonin, that mood enhancer, stabilizer. So how can we do this naturally? We need to be living a life of purpose and fulfillment to do this. And so what's really important, and I was reading in this News Plus of the Apple News today, they had an article about Bronnie Ware. And Bronnie Ware's a psychologist who she interviewed all these people that are on their deathbeds, essentially about to die. And she was asking them questions as to what do they feel, did they live a fulfilling life? And those that didn't live a fulfilling life, she asked why, and they said, because I was trying to please others. I was trying to live a life that others wanted me to live. And I was trying to live in their shadows, and they weren't being themselves. And essentially what she's coming to in the conclusion is that to live authenticity, to live with the authenticity, to live authentic. And how do you live authentic? It's by living by what's most important to you. And it's very much what I'm aligned to. And it's where I've found the most joy from within. And I'm not seeking these addictive behaviors externally, such as emotional eating, eating those comfort foods. I don't need them. Yes, I can choose to have them, but I'm not driven that I must have it. I'm not being run by emotional center to say that I've got to have that. I need it. It's a must. And I just bust open that cupboard and rip open that packet of biscuits. For me, it's a choice. I can choose. I'm in control. And it's because I've really started to live a life aligned to what's most important to me. And I've started to delegate those things that are low priority, such as editing this podcast, which I've discussed on a previous podcast, such as doing social media. I don't enjoy those things. I enjoy enlightening and empowering the well-being of others. And that's my mission statement. And when I'm doing that, I'm on purpose. And so doing this podcast is purposeful for me. I don't need anyone to remind me to do this podcast. As you can see, that I can talk for ages and keep talking about a particular subject. It's because I've got so much to share on this subject. I'm always educating myself in this area. Always. When I have a spare moment, I'm educating myself in this area. And there's a lot for you, listeners, in terms of coming next year, is on quantum healing. I'm really digging deep into quantum physics and how we can apply quantum physics, quantum healing into our everyday lives. So you'll be enlightened with some brilliant guests. There is a prelude to this with an episode with Nathan Siles that's coming up. That's shortly will be dropping probably before this episode. I need to get my order right. But so you might have listened to it, but it's the, using light as medicine, essentially, is what Nathan's talking about. And I'm going to be interviewing experts like Nathan in this area of quantum healing. And so you're going to get this insight around quantum physics and how you can apply it to your everyday life to enhance your well-being. So in terms of getting back to emotions and living a life of fulfillment, it's doing the things that you are intrinsically motivated to do. And these are the things that you'll spontaneously do without anyone reminding you and having to reward you to do them. Like I said, I don't need any reminder to do this podcast. I don't need extrinsic motivation such as payment to do this podcast. In actual fact, it costs me to produce this podcast. It's coming at a cost to me. It's an investment for me. So certainly there's no monetary incentive for me with this podcast, but it drives my mission statement, which is to enhance and enlighten the well-being of others. And so that's where I get the fulfillment, is by educating and enlightening you. So what is it that you love doing? Is it that you love your physical appearance, like you value your physical appearance? And so you don't need to be reminded to wash your face, to clean your teeth, to do your exercise, to eat good foods, because you're driven to look physically great all the time. That's really important to you. Or it could be that you're really into fashion. And so to look great in clothes is really important to you. So you spend your money on fashion. I've just recently brought a new microphone handle thing, or a wing or something, that an arm that will get the microphone closer to my mouth. And so I'm constantly investing in this podcast because it helps me fulfill my mission. So where are you investing your money, spending your money? What are you spending your time doing that no one needs to remind you to do these things? Such as, for me, it's education on health, but it's specific education on health. I don't educate myself in other areas other than really health. And that's a very encompassing area. It's a very broad area. So there's lots to cover. But where are you seeking education? Is it that you want healthy children, a successful family? So you're constantly educating yourself in your family, getting education around your family. You're constantly spending your money on your family. Well, that's a high value. And that's where you'll see success. That's where you'll get feedback, is that you're on course and you feel that fulfillment from within, because you start to see the signals or the KPIs. You start to hit your KPIs in that area. And you'll set objectives in these areas. You'll be very organized and disciplined in these areas. Just like I'm organized and disciplined with my podcast. I do a recording every week without fail. And I've been doing that for over 3 years now. So you can see how it very much aligns to my values. If it didn't align to my values, I would have dropped off, because I'm certainly not getting paid to do it. It's costing me money. So again, it's because I'm fulfilling my mission in doing it. This is a great way for me to fulfill my mission. So what is it that you can do on a daily basis that brings you fulfillment? Understand that there's a hierarchy of these things that you value. So I also value my family. And so I'm always investing time. How can I spend time with family? And for example, I value health and my family. So I do karate with my kids, and I tick 2 boxes at once. So it's fantastic. I was once my kids' soccer coach. So they were doing sport, they were doing something healthy, and I was getting involved. Rather than just watch them, I was actually getting involved in helping out with that association through being a soccer coach. And so there's so many ways that which you can integrate your values, and so that you're living out your values every day, moment by moment, essentially. And if you're doing a job that you can't see how it serves you and what's most important to you, then ask yourself the question, how is your job helping you fulfill what's most important to you? And we've seen this through the pandemic, that people have lost sight of why they started that job. And we all sign up to jobs that align to our purpose, align to what's important to us. But we lose sight of that over time when we focus on the negatives associated with the work. And our human brain is wired to focus on the negative and to distort the negatives. That's a survival mechanism. We also do that around the positives too at times, but we're more wired towards the negatives because the negatives are associated with pain and predator. And so if we don't get away from the predator, we're not alive. So we're always going to have a stronger association or connection to the negatives and be more driven away from pain than towards pleasure. Because, for example, what gives us pleasure is when we get prey, but we can go days without getting prey. So you'll probably follow why we're wired the way we are. And people think, I tend to stack up the negatives. I tend to think more negatively. We're wired that way. There's nothing wrong with you. We're all wired that way. But if you can get out of that part of your brain and start living by priority and live by purpose, that's when we've got our executive function turned on. That's the prefrontal cortex. And that's where we have governance over that desire center, that emotional center that drives us towards emotional eating. So I really want you to reflect on what's really important to you and not compare yourselves to others in terms of everyone's going to achieve success in the area that's of high value to them. So I often get, cues that I'm on track in these areas that are valuable to me, such as my health, such as education, me doing this podcast. I get cues in terms of, I get feedback around my listeners. My listeners give me feedback. I get reviews. I get more listeners and all those sort of things. They're my metrics around, yes, am I adding value or am I not adding value? If I'm not adding value, then how can I add more value in this area? Because I'm not going to stop doing this. And that's why I asked the listeners as to what you'd like me to talk about, because I'm here to add value for you. I can talk about a lot of things around health and well-being. And I have had listeners. I've had Scott from New Zealand's given me fantastic feedback as to content he'd like me to either find an expert in, which I have, and I've delivered on that content. And so if you've got any feedback, please reach out to me. I would love to fulfill your needs around health and well-being, because that gives you a sense of fulfillment, because you're listening to this podcast because health is a high value to you. I only attract people that have health as a high value. Otherwise, they'll be listening to another podcast. For example, if they're more intrigued in thrillers or comedy, they'll be listening to those podcasts because they're higher value to them. So you're listening to this podcast because it's of high value to you. Well, how else can I add more value to you? So reach out to me. Let me know. Who would you like me to interview next year? I'll put it on the list of people to reach out to. So living by purpose will lift you out of that emotional center. So what can happen is in the evening, people start to depurpose themselves. They start to attract boredom by thinking, just watch TV, I've got nothing else to do. Well, what I want you to start thinking, rather than watch TV and feel unfulfilled and sort of flick around the channels, can't find anything that's going to spark your interest, rather than do that and waste your time and scroll through social media, ask yourself, what does fulfill you? And how can you do that? So if you're empowered in the area of family, so that's a high value to you, and that is an intrinsic motivation, well, maybe get a book on how to raise a healthy, happy family or something like that. Or maybe follow a podcast around family health. And so start listening to that in the evening. Start writing notes. Start doing things that are fulfilling for you in the evening, and you won't feel this need to eat. When we're bored, our survival mechanism is switched on because we're unfulfilled. We're lacking purpose and meaning. And so what we do is we get into that survival center. That survival center is looking for that in the environment, and it looks externally for that fulfillment. So you can avoid this mechanism switching on by doing something that's fulfilling to you in the evening. The other tip that I've learned, which you'll learn more about next year when I start to get more into quantum healing, is the effect blue light's having on us in the evening. So blue light is telling the body that it's the middle of the day and middle of summer. So this is our artificial lighting. This is the environmentally friendly lighting that's doing this. That's obviously consumes low energy, gives a huge amount of brightness, but to our photoreceptors in our eyes, it's telling the body, our body clock, the pineal gland, our suprachiasmatic nucleus, the SCN, that it's the middle of the day and it's in the evening. And so what is our body seeking in the middle of the day? It's seeking food in the middle of the day. You think about it. That's how we're wired. We seek food in the middle of the day. We sleep at night. Nocturnal creatures sleep during the day and seek food at night. So you see the bats come out at night. We're not a bat, okay? So what we want to do is minimize the lighting, do something that's fulfilling to us, such as you want to use lighting that's not that white blue light. It's not that fluorescent lighting. You can actually buy these infrared lighting that's more red, that gives more red. even the old traditional lamp that's not environmentally friendly. But look, in terms of impact on the environment, a little bit of light coming from a lamp for you to read for an hour, is that going to have a major impact? I think you can have a bigger impact on the environment through other ways. So seek means at which you reduce your lighting. So candlelight in the evening is fantastic because that doesn't affect our melatonin production. It's softer lights. It's longer wavelength light to our eyes. And that is signaling to our body that it's the end of day to do end of day things, which is to turn down digestion, to turn up melatonin, to turn down cortisol. Middle of the day, our cortisol's pumping, okay? And this is why people think, oh, in the evening, I need to stay up I can't get to sleep before 10 p.m. It's because you're under blue lights, you're looking at screens. So, for example, I've brought these blue light filtering glasses. I could probably get away with not wearing it now, or probably not. It's the morning, so there's not much blue light in the morning. It's mainly around that middle of the day, early afternoon, later morning, much later morning. I'm recording this early morning. Well, not too early, but it's certainly not when the blue light's peaking. So it probably makes sense to filter out the blue light. I still get the natural light through the sides, but I'm not getting just the blue lights into the photoreceptors and it telling the body, start pumping that cortisol, start boosting it up, start seeking food. So minimize your lighting. That's where I'm going with this. Down your lighting, dim it. I'm fortunate that I have a lot of windows that bring in a lot of moonlight. And so I can pretty much have all the lights, all the artificial lights off and just the moonlight. And that's telling my photoreceptors and my pineal gland that it's nighttime. There's more darkness than light. Hence, make melatonin. And that melatonin's making me drowsy and sleepy. So start getting into this practice in the evening is winding down, really important. So in order for you not to get stuck in that survival center, it's important to get a good night's sleep. And this is where I'm leading to in the evening. So our evening can often unravel us, cause us to stay up late. The next day, we are then in survival mode. We're trying to keep operating. We're trying to keep functioning, but our body's really tired and it's pumping out cortisol in order to keep you awake. And then you feel these peaks and troughs because we have this imbalance around insulin. It's surging, it's pumping everything away into cells. Then you feel no energy because there's nothing, our cells become resistant to the insulin because it's always around. And then the cells aren't getting and so this whole cycle feeds upon itself. So really important that you, in the evening, you do something that's fulfilling. That's number one that I've shared. And you dim the lights. You minimize the lighting. And if you need to be on screens, use these blue light blocking filtering glasses. So use them, buy a pair, go to Amazon. There's some really good, obviously get the ones that are endorsed and rated and properly, that they've been approved by certain regulatory bodies. So make sure you get good ones that are actually filtering out the blue light, and do something that's fulfilling and meaningful to you. So you could dim the lights and listen to a podcast. You don't need to be watching screens. So again, there's so many ways in which we can do something fulfilling. And if you like doing comedy, listening to comedy, you don't have to listen to my podcast. If you prefer comedy, that's a higher value, then listen to comedy. That's what I want you to do. That's what's going to fulfill you in the evening. And you won't look for that extrinsic fulfillment in the form of food. So that's one area that I've discussed around purpose and meaning, and having that in the evening, because that's where I find my clients get really unstuck. It's because in the evening, they generate boredom. They think, this is what I do. This is what I've always done, is sit in front of the TV and watch stuff that I don't really want to watch, that's unfulfilling. And so therefore, the body goes into the survival center, goes to the cupboard, automatically rips into those biscuits, and then you consume copious amounts of calories in the evening, and then you feel bad about yourself, and so you eat more in order to pick yourself up. And so it's this vicious cycle. So what else can we do? I mentioned at the earlier the episode is what gets us in that survival center is the way we perceive life, the way we interact with the world around us, and how we interpret our perceptions of what we're getting in terms of sensory information. And so we filter this through our thalamus. Our thalamus filters this. And this thalamus, this filter, is formed through our experiences through life. And so depending on who raised you, whether it was parents, grandparents, it was guardians, they've had an influence on you. And so they've shared their views of the world onto you. And so you take in, and particularly under the age of 7, we just absorb everything. So this is generally where things sort of go a bit haywire for young people, where they may get distorted views of reality, is in those early years of life, those first 7 years, because we just take everything in as a sponge. We don't have the ability to analyze it, to critique it. We're just absorbing everything. And this is why we learn languages so well, because we're not analyzing it. We're not sort of thinking, oh, this is confusing to this and this. We just take it in. We just absorb it, because our brains are in lower wave frequencies. And this is the other thing that can be helpful, is obviously slowing down your brain in the evening. By slowing down our brain, we get to these more relaxing states of consciousness. And so this is where children are under the age of 7. They're more in that alpha state, alpha theta state, which is low frequency waves. It's where we are more susceptible to what's coming in. So this is what hypnosis does to us, right? It gets us in, it slows our brain waves down. We get into a state of trance, and it's where we're more subjective, or not subjective, but we have this more vulnerable, susceptible to just whatever they say is what we, so this is where we need to be careful in the evening. If our brain waves slowing down and we can't analyze the information coming in properly and see the pros and cons to it, then it can be very suggestive to us. It can actually, and this is what the advertisers seek to do, to actually get into your subconscious awareness, to get through the conscious mind. And this is what hypnosis does. It gets into that subconscious mind. And this is why it's effective in a way, because it can help get ideas into you, into the subconscious. And our subconscious, it runs our autonomic nervous system. So again, having a conscious awareness, it is helpful when we want to assess things and analyze things. But sometimes when we've been told the wrong thing, it can be an easy way to unravel that thing that hasn't been helpful for us. And this is why hypnotherapy works, is effective, because it slows our brain waves down and we're more subjusive. I think it is the word I'm looking for, because we're in a trance state. Children are in that trance state in the first 7 years. So where am I going with this? In the evening, our brains can be operating at a really high frequency, and we're seeking to calm our brain waves down, because when we have lots of files open, we feel all over the place. We feel scattered, and that's where we're in our beta waves, in the beta state, and that's greater than 33 hertz, 33 cycles per second. So we are very active. Our brain's very active. It's, wired, very switched on, and often we want to calm down. And sometimes we go to the alcohol, and this again is calming the nervous system down, but we can find better ways, constructive ways to calm the nervous system by doing something that's fulfilling to us. It calms the nervous system. So I'm in a more calm state when I'm doing this, because it's fulfilling to me. I'm not getting agitated thinking, oh, I can't wait for this to be over. I'm looking for the finishing line. In actual fact, I lose track of time, and I have to keep an eye on the clock, because I'm thinking, oh, I don't know if you want to listen to me ramble on for so long. So I actually sometimes cut the episode a bit short to where I'd like it to go. But rather than me keep rambling on, in the evening, we can slow our brain waves through getting into something that is purposeful or meaning to us, or of high value to us. When we're doing things of low value to us, it gets us into that emotional center, because we're feeling lack of meaning, lack of purpose. We feel boredom. We start questioning our existence, and we go into survival mode. So we want to stay in thrival mode, where we know our purpose and meaning, and we're doing things that are fulfilling to us. So other ways in which we can calm our brain without the alcohol, without the food, is through breathing. So connecting with breath. So doing some breath work in the evening. Again, you can do this with the lights dim, the lights as low as they can be. You can listen to some nice calming music. Calming music. What's calming music for you? And do your breathing. Focus on your breathing, or do some form of meditation. You can do a body scan. There's so many ways in which you can connect mind and body and feel at one as opposed to split. And so I'm going to get into this split because that's where I was going before, around our perceptions. So we perceive the world. That's where I got lost. That's where I went on the tangent, is with children, the way they perceive the world and the way we. So I was talking about the thalamus, and that's a filtering. And so there's so many factors that have influenced these filters, and that's the way we perceive the world, is through this filtering process. However, it's not the reality. It's been filtered through that process. And so in order for us to understand the reality, we've got to ask ourselves questions. And when we ask ourselves questions, we find more neural associations and higher level linkages, and we can transcend our mind out of that survival state. So hasn't got a subjective bias. How do you know you've got a subjective bias? Is when you feel those lower level emotions, such as you feel sadness, you're upset, you're frustrated, you're irritable, you're angry. These are all lower level emotions. Or you're feeling ecstatic, jubilant. And so again, jubilant, ecstatic, over happy, all these sort of things, they're because we see more upside than downside. And then the other emotions, these are both really, they're not transcendental emotions. These are very subjective emotions where we're seeing one side and not seeing the other side. And these other emotions, such as the ones that make us a bit sad, the ones we call negative emotions, angry, frustrated, irritable, impatient, all these things, is because we see more downside than upside. So what we need to do is balance our perception. What are we unconscious of? So when we're seeing more sadness, we're conscious of the negative, but unconscious of the positive. So what we need to bring to our conscious awareness, so we have complete awareness, we have full awareness, is start looking for the positive. Okay, so if something's got you down, what is it that's got you down? Be very specific as to what has got you down. What are you judging? And don't label it, because if you label it, it's too general. It's the specific thing about what someone's done to you, or you might have done it to someone else and feel shame about what you've done. So it might be an action that you're judging yourself for, or you might be judging someone else for what they've done to you. So get very clear as to what it is, so that then you can ask yourself, what is the benefit to me and what I value and in all areas of life? And you start looking for those benefits. So if someone started to talk me down, like I started, and again, the reason why they talk me down is because I'm getting inauthentic. I'm getting too proud, and that's not me. When I'm authentic, I'm not proud or I'm not shameful. I'm right in the middle. I'm very centered. And so if I'm starting to brag about something and someone's starting to talk negative about what I'm talking positive about, and then I can perceive that someone as being non-supportive, and they're not supportive of me, and I can start to see that as just negative. But then if I ask myself, how are they helping me? Well, they're starting to get me to be more of who I am, to start to get me to the center of being authentic. They're starting to help me see something that I'm not seeing. They're bringing that to my conscious awareness. So they're telling me what's missing or how I could do better. They're challenging me. And that challenging of me is ultimately what helps me grow as a person. It's going to help me grow. So if I'm bragging about my podcast and they're saying, oh, you only get 30 listeners per episode or something, that's nothing compared to Huberman, he gets 1 million or whatever, then they're challenging me. They're actually, I could perceive that them as putting me down and not supporting me and giving me a pat on my back. Yes, it's good to have a balance of support and challenge, but when you have too much support and not enough challenge, we don't grow. We get content, we get complacent, and we start to depurpose. Whereas that person, by challenging me, saying, well, you should aspire to have 1 million followers per episode or 1 million listens per episode, then they're actually lifting me up. And that's how it's serving me. They're challenging me. They're putting the challenge down. How can I improve every episode? How can I improve my podcast? How do I better get it out to more people? Now, I start thinking of these things, ways in which I can grow the podcast, rather than seeing them as putting me down and saying that I'm nothing compared to Huberman. I could then see, they're inspiring me to improve the podcast, to make it better. Again, I'm not Andrew Huberman, and I'll never will be, and I don't want to be. But how can I do better in terms of who I am and what I want to do and achieve around my podcast? How can I improve it? And that's how they're challenging me. That's the benefit of them putting me down. And so that's what you want to look at. And it's the same as something you might be shameful for. So if you're shameful for yelling at your children, well, then start to look at the benefits of how it benefits your children by yelling at them. There is a benefit of yelling. It's not just all negative. Again, that's just put upon us from an early age or from someone, some outer authority that we looked up to at one stage. They've said that that's bad. And I remember having a lot of these conversations with the Indian population, was that they really struggled with speaking up, speaking out. And, and again, it's sort of, well, if you don't speak up and speak out, how are you ever going to get your needs met? How are you going to grow and develop if you're not actually articulating what you want or what your needs are? And how can people help you? So how can you grow and add value to the human race if you're not being heard? So again, if I'm feeling bad about yelling at my kids, what's the benefit of me yelling at them? Have I woken them up to, like, I remember someone shared with me, one of my clients shared that they felt bad for yelling at their children. And I said, well, it serves a purpose. So, for example, are you going to speak softly to them when they're about to step out in front of a car? Are you going to speak softly to them when they're about to hurt themselves? So speaking up and speaking loud serves a purpose because people hear you, okay? So again, it's not all bad. It's just a label. And so there is a benefit in yelling or speaking up or speaking loudly so that people understand that it's important. It's an important thing for them to be aware of. I'm making emphasis on certain words by speaking up, turning the volume up. So again, start balancing your perceptions around how you're seeing things and ask yourself, what are you unconscious of? If you're just conscious of the positives, what is the downside? Okay, how is it not helping you? And you'll start to get a balanced perception of it. And therefore you won't then have this subconscious desire to seek more of it because you have an imbalanced perception. So if you see something, and this is what happens with drug addiction, this is what happens with alcohol addiction, is there's a perception of more upside than downside. And so as we are creatures that seek survival as a primary or a necessity. And so it's, in terms of Maslow's basic human needs, as you can see, they're all survival down at the bottom of the pyramid. And then you get into more the transcendent ones as you go up the pyramid. But you've got to have that basic needs met in order to transcend. And generally today, a lot of us have our basic needs met, but we're stuck in that survival mode. We're stuck there. And it's because we have imbalanced perceptions about things and we're not seeing a balanced perception of it. When we balance our perceptions, we balance our emotions. We have a more objective view of it. We can make a better, more informed decision. We are more mindful. We have complete awareness as opposed to incomplete awareness. Incomplete awareness drives that desire towards something or that instinct away from something. It's because we have incomplete awareness. It's missing information. We want to complete our awareness by seeking information and ask ourselves, what are we not conscious of? What is it that we are missing? And we want to bring that unconscious awareness to our conscious mind so that we're fully aware. We have an objective view and complete awareness, completely mindful of it. And we see reality. We see reality as opposed to an illusion. When we just see this distorted view, this subjective view of something, it's an illusion. We can only see reality when we have that complete awareness and not missing information. So again, if you're feeling emotional, start asking yourself, what emotion are you feeling? Are you feeling sadness? Therefore, you're perceiving more negatives than positives. Start asking yourself the question, how is it serving you and what you value most and in all areas of life? And that will help transcend your emotions. It will help balance your perceptions, calm those lower level emotions, stop them from running you, and you will run you. You will be the master of your destiny. So start balancing your perceptions. That's really helpful. That's really, really helpful, particularly in the evening, because in the evening we start to unwind, we start to process our day, and then these things pop up that we got emotional about and we had incomplete awareness at the time. So as part of the wind down process, what you want to do is anything that you can't say thank you for in your day, you want to apply this exercise to the point that you can say, thank you, I now have a complete awareness of what's happened, and I have an objective view on it. I can see how it served me. I can also see how it's not served me, but I have a balanced perspective of it. And so therefore, I can see how it's on the way for me fulfilling what's most important to me, as opposed to in the way, or how it's really helping me become a better person. And this is what emotional intelligence ultimately is being able to transcend those lower level emotions and not allowing the lower level emotions to run you. So that's really important in terms of eating your emotions. So what I want you to think of, if you feel emotional and you've got a desire to eat, do some breathing, start calming down those fast wavelengths that are just going crazy and you can't make any sense of anything because your wavelengths are just operating at 33 and above hertz, and you need to slow them down to start accessing that subconscious and bring that to your conscious awareness. Again, if we don't slow down our wavelengths through some breathing, it's very hard to then get access to that subconsciousness. We need to actually slow our wavelengths down in order to bring that to our conscious awareness. So calm yourself down through some breathing or something that calms you down, whatever it is, listening to some music, having an Epsom salt bath, whatever calms you down, do that. And then you'll start to be able to process your day completely. In a sense, not only give gratitude for the things that tended to blow in your direction, tended to support you, but you can give thanks to the things that you thought were a hindrance, but you now see the hidden order in it because you can see both sides of the event, as opposed to judging and labeling it and only having that subjective awareness of it. So that is a really helpful exercise to do in the evening, is this processing exercise of your day to really help balance your emotions, because otherwise that emotion will be stored as baggage and will pop up when anything reminds you of that event in the future. And you don't want that, because it then starts sending that feeling into the body. And then you start feeling that feeling in the body. You feel terrible. Then you start thinking terrible things. And it's a vicious cycle. In order to break that cycle, we need to balance our perceptions of that moment that's you perceived as being more negative than positive. And then you actually have a complete awareness around it. And there's no missing information. You see both sides to it. You can see how it served you and how it was that you saw it as a hindrance at the time. But now you see the ultimate objective view of it, that you can now see that it's ultimately helped you become a better person. So that is really important in terms of eating your emotions, is balancing your perception, living by priority, really important. I mentioned and I spoke a lot about that, living by priority, balancing your perceptions, neutralizing or calming your emotions, and then really transcending your thinking and seeing things as on the way as opposed to in the way, as hindrances. You see them as fuel as opposed to baggage. So that's it for this episode on eating your emotions. I just want to finish with adding something around nutrition. So I think the thing also that can also send someone unstuck, and again, this is your bonus part of this episode. I've just become aware of the time that I've been speaking for quite some time, but I just wanted to add this nutritional part in. So this is the bonus section. So what can happen is if we've starved ourselves all day, then we're actually going to get signals from our body that we don't have complete nourishment. We don't have enough fuel on board. And again, they're biological signals to say that we haven't eaten enough protein, we haven't got enough nourishment, and the body feels that there's something missing in terms of that biological nourishment. And so again, by starving yourself all day and then loading your calories in the evening can create this cycle that you're never satisfied, because you eat so quickly because you're starving, you actually don't get the hunger signals to say you've had enough, and you keep eating. So what I see with my clients is those that have been running hard all day and forgot to eat or haven't eaten much, then all the eating is backloaded at the end of the day. They scoff their food down, don't allow the time for it to register in the brain that they're full. They scoff more food down, and then they're stuffed, and then that affects their sleep, and then that affects the next day, as I mentioned. You'll be then running on your adrenals, and your adrenals will be running you, and you'll be emotionally eating the next day, and studies show that you consume more calories after a sleep deficit. So what I suggest you do in relation to this is make sure you have breakfast. Make sure you start your day well and then finish your day well. So eat big in the morning, eat light at night. Because you can eat light at night if you've nourished your body during the day. And that's when we need the calories. That's when we need the nourishment. At night, we want to rest our digestive system. That's when we want the fast, is at night. And we want it to be a good fast. We don't want to have a big pig out and then we're digesting our food when we're supposed to be resting our body, and the body's supposed to be recuperating and regenerating. We don't want it to be digesting, because that's limiting the amount of recuperation and deep sleep, deep restorative sleep that we're going to get that night. And then we're going to wake up tired. And then we're going to seek emotional foods to keep us going, such as sugar and fat, highly calorific foods. So eat light at night. And the only way you can do that is by eating most of your calories during the day when you need it most. You need the fuel during the day. So that's what I'm going to finish on in terms of nutrition. That's your little bonus. And I appreciate you being a fantastic listener. As I said, love you to give me feedback as to who you'd like me to interview next year. I'm starting to look at my program for the podcast next year of who I want on. I'm certainly going to be covering more quantum healing, and you're going to get a huge amount of benefits through quantum healing. And what else would you like to hear? What else would you like me to speak more of or deeper into? What else do you want me to get deeper into, or what expert do I bring on? Who would you like on the show? Let me know. I'd really like to help meet your health needs. I know it's a high value of yours. So that's it. Thank you for your ears. Thank you for tuning in to Me and My Health Up. If you found this of value, please share it with others. I am on a mission to enhance and enlighten the well-being of others. The more you share this, the more I achieve my mission. That's my KPI, is to get it out to more ears. Or tell me how I can better do this to get more ears. If you've got the insight, please share it with me. I'm open and receptive. So thank you for tuning in. Have a great end of year. Lots of time for reflection, connection, and I'm coming up to my 200th episode. So there's going to be a big one, and there's lots more next year in store. Thank you. Podcast disclaimer. This podcast and any information, advice, opinions, or statements within it do not constitute medical, healthcare, or professional advice and are provided for general information purposes only. All care is taken in the preparation of the information in this podcast. Connected Wellness Proprietary Limited, operating under the brand Me and My Health Up, does not make any representations or give any warranties about its accuracy, reliability, completeness, or suitability for any particular purpose. This podcast and any information, advice, opinions, or statements within it are not to be used as a substitute for professional, medical, psychological, psychiatric, or any other mental health care or healthcare in general. Me and My Health Up recommends you seek the advice of a doctor or qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Inform your doctor of any changes that you made to your lifestyle and discuss these with your doctor. Do not disregard medical advice or delay visiting a medical professional because of something you hear in this podcast. This podcast has been carefully prepared on the basis of current information. Changes in circumstances after publication may affect the accuracy of this information. To the maximum extent permitted by the law, Me and My Health Up disclaims any such representations or warranties to the completeness, accuracy, merchantability, or fitness for purpose of this podcast, and will not be liable for any expenses, losses, damages incurred, indirect or consequential damages or costs that may be incurred as a result of the information being inaccurate or incomplete in any way and for any reason. No part of this podcast can be reproduced, redistributed, published, copied, or duplicated in a form without prior permission of Me and My Health Up.